Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. The one and only V the Gorilla, and we have today a very, very, very special broadcast. We are talking about the year in review and the year ahead. We do this every single year where we get together the Avengers, the real guys who have a pulse to what is happening in the world today. We have everyone from Veles, Matt Ehret, Tom Luongo should be joining us, Gus Demas, Ben Kelleran, Xoaquin Flores, and more. And of course, CJ is going to be joining us as well. So it's going to be a jam-packed event. Hopefully, we can load everybody on here. With that being said, good morning, guys. How are you?
Doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing great. I apologize.
Morning. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good morning.
Matt.
Hello. Long time no see, guys.
Hey, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's here. Who's missing? Right
I got to grab Tom.
All right, grab Tom. And CJ's coming, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Siege is coming.
Who's
right, cool.
who's Hamas Venezuela? Is
That's
that
Gus.
That's Gus.
That's,
Hey, Gus.
that's Gus. That's the infamous Gus Demas. Oh man. So I guess we can begin. I guess Matt, Happy New Year. We'll start with you. We'll go to Gus, Ben, and Veles, and Nick, and we'll go that way. So Matt, Happy New Year. Good morning. How you doing this day, man? What's happening in your neck of the woods? Most importantly, how did you feel about 2025? And you got 2026 here. A lot of things carrying over. So very quickly, I want you to just give you a little intro and
yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I'll just quickly. 2026, whatever it's going to be, is definitely going to test our mettle like we've never expected. I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for growth and becoming the better part of ourselves, because we're going to need to, because I think we really are going to, the storm is not going to dissipate. We all here know that we're sitting on a giant time bomb called the financial system, and I feel like the likelihood is an extreme acceleration of an already accelerating meltdown of that system, and I think the fight is on over what are going to be the terms and rules of the new operating system that will be brought online, and who is it really going to serve. And in my mind, I'm always trying to think about, the fact that this battle, the contours are relatively underdefined right now. That their knives are out. The most anti-entropic expression that I could see that's in harmony with something I identify with natural law is what I see coming out of China and its broader Eurasian allies. As flawed as that is, it's still premised on an idea of genuine desire for real growth that is human-centric, that centers itself on the idea that human beings have to be protected at all costs, and that are the source of the value. Hey, Tom. Hey, CJ.
Hey. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, apologies, Tom. That's on me that you just got the link.
I know. Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's all good. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, buddy.
So yeah, my whole thing is I was just going through like my very brief 2-second assessment. My hope is that there's sufficient patriots who have the wits to adapt and to play the game that is being set by the rules put forth by China's concepts of physical economic development, technological progress, and I'm hoping that there's sufficient people in the patriot crowd around with influence that can do this well, and not with a dishonest idea of maybe mimicking anti-entropy, mimicking progress in order to ultimately subvert the inferior nations and cultures and civilizational states. In the longer run, I'm hoping that we get some authentic desire for cooperation around Arctic development, space cooperation, and other things that Russia and China are moving ahead on. So we'll see. That's my trepidation, my hope and my fears going into 2026 and beyond.
Well said, Gus. Hamas in Venezuela. Gus, how was 2025? What stood out for you? And what are you looking at for 26?
I think 2025 for me was the final stage of a red pill.
Yeah.
Like acceptance that, we often say, you could say there are different types of, that term's been so over fucking played the last 15 years, but there are different types of red pills, and my red pill in 2025 was like, holy fuck, like even this guy that we all, had big hopes for, 2015, 2016, 2020, that would push back a little bit, slow this fucking thing down. Maybe some fucking pedophile somewhere will get handcuffs eventually. No, it was all bullshit. So the 2025 was my final stage of red pill. Oh, he's just part of it. Who knows?
Really?
His life? Do they have him on something? Do they have one of his kids on something? Who the fuck knows? But at this point, he's a Shabbat goy. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing. It's all humiliating. Everything. The country's a fucking scam. Everything's fraud. Everything's a scam. From the AI bubbles to the Somalian bullshit to the Israeli-Ukrainian bullshit. Everything's money laundering. Everything's fraud. SWAT team and kick the door down of the middle class and the opposition, while the welfare queens and Jewish oligarchs could plunder whatever the fuck they want. The empire's burning. The empire's finished. It's just a matter of where do we want to go from here? And it's what I've seen the last 72 hours. Who knows if it's bullshit or not? Like everything else we see. But when I see let's just say larger count influencers on X talking about tax revolt, why are we paying taxes? I'm like, oh, we might have gotten to the we might have gotten to the end of the fucking rainbow where people are actually ready. Everything's fake. Both political parties are a fucking joke. We're wasting our time voting and whatever. And everyone's been talking about civil war. So you don't have to do a civil war. The solution might be millions of people just stop participating in this fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
That being said, is it real? Is it fake? Are they trying to get someone to say something illegal, like more entrapment bullshit, which we've seen over and over and over? Perhaps. But what I could tell you, first having seen it firsthand in other countries, where the economy goes to cash transactions, no longer they starve out the government. Everyone stops playing by the rules. And I've said it forever. We're one of the last countries we're clearly, this population is terrified of their government still. Mm-hmm. You saw it with COVID, and you've seen it ever since. If there reaches a point where this population is no longer terrified by their government, and millions of people stop participating, that might be the end game solution. Yeah. This has all been a fucking scam and a fake soap opera for us. And it's just time to stop fucking playing along with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Veles, you're 2025, looking forward to 2026. What was on your radar, and what do you feel?
I'll go with my normal theme of movie quotes for Al Pacino from The Devil's Advocate. The final fig leaf has fallen. And what do you call it? To quote George Friedman, one of his last books, the storm before the calm, the storm before the calm before the storm again. And last but not least, the tighter the controls that are out there, whether cyber or similar, that they continue to try and enforce. To paraphrase E.M. Burlingame's theme of what do you call it? Thermodynamics. You just can't do it. I don't care how many data centers you build. And last but not least, the more tight they try to make that network, it just takes one Patrick Ryan with a laptop to break it. So yeah, as we go into 2026, there's a sadistic sense of amusement for me, and also a bit of fear. Because to use a quote I've said on a couple of my programs, it reminds me of the grad professor I had who was an avowed Marxist, who said, "You can hate a hegemonic power all you want, but the problem is we've never lived without one. So what happens when you lose the hegemonic power?" So that's it for me. Ben?
I don't have much. I think it's going to be an interesting year for markets as far as what's going on. You see, I'm sure some of you guys have been paying attention to the precious metals and what's going on between China and the U.S. And if you guys haven't been following Vince Lanchi's work on that, like you're missing out. But I think it's going to continue to be a bumpy ride for silver, gold, platinum, all the stuff that I like. And as far as like broader markets, I'm not sure how things work out if everyone's not getting the S&P welfare. So, I mean, I've kind of given up on being bearish on terms of valuation or fundamentals or anything like that, where it's just like, I don't participate. So, like, could the AI bubble keep going? Maybe. But are some of these things going to come back to earth eventually? Like, for sure. It's just a matter of when. And I've kind of given up the guessing game on trying to figure out when that is. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts on financial markets or precious metals, but I know when you get people talking about $1,000 silver, it's probably time for a break. But my guess is that we're probably going to see triple digits, definitely in the next 2 years, but I would guess sometime in 26.
All right. Joaquin.
What's good? What's good, man? Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year's. Suretna, what is it? Suretna Nova Godina.
Yes, such a Novi Godina.
What do you think? You know, we're here, we're doing sort of a 2025 look back, 2026 prediction. And one thing I've noticed is that there's a pretty broad opinion in the panel. We have those who are a little more on the black-pilled side, and maybe there's those of us who are not quite as pessimistic. Might be a place to start for you.
Pessimism about what? About the coming year?
Coming year, what's going on with, say politics, where the U.S. might be headed, the rest of the world. I mean, I know your specialties are very broad.
Subjective. I mean, I wish I had popped on a minute earlier to catch some of the wisdom of the folks before me. What's up, Matt?
Actually, we started a few minutes late, and you guys really we missed. You guys missed a little bit of Gus, but really, you guys popped on right as we started, more or less. So,
all right. Well, a lot of it is subjective, and I'm not going to suggest that our, collective consciousness necessarily determines by itself like outcomes, but I'm generally optimistic about what's to come in the coming year. And I think whether from an individual point of view or how you see the world or how things are going to work out for most other people, like I'm not of the opinion that the end of the world is coming or something right now. I can say that with kind of some among the trends of 2025 in talking about whether you're talking about like markets or government overreach, government manipulation, the rise of AI, the tech oligarchy, so to speak. What I find interesting is that a lot of that discourse is happening in this kind of bubble of abstraction, as if like we're having a deliberation about, okay, we have this horizontal, totally democratic, autonomous, anarcho, whatever society, and now we're deliberating, or now we see this new tech oligarchy that's come into power. Instead, I see a rotation of elites. I see like an increased prominence in that particular group of oligarchs, and they have the philosophy that they have, or their bad philosophies are going to have negative impacts on outcomes, and but they're not necessarily free at whim to like implement or to manifest their ideations to the extent that people don't allow it. So like I'm optimistic. I think people have tremendous power in their lives, tremendous agency. I see a very healthy conversation happening like across so many different domains, in virtual spaces, in the real world. So I see that's a changeover in the vertical of the society in terms of the particular industries. And which technologies are favored by those industries are going to favor a new group or clique of oligarchs that have a tremendous impact on power, But I think that stepping a step back from that and looking at it's appropriate at the year's end. I appreciate that. We really have to go back 5 or 6 years to really see this sea change, this tectonic shift in the approach of the elites and how they're going to address fundamental questions about like what is the role of human beings in the society. And I think we're in the right direction. Like I think we've gotten off of this kind of Davos World Economic Forum population reduction thing. I think in the way that the tech oligarchy, as dark as many of them may be, are looking at, what is the role of the human being, even for their own Machiavellian designs. In fact, I would privilege those designs over others, in fact, in understanding what they mean to do. Just in terms of hedging my own bets, I would like to think they have some good ideas. It'd be nice to see some beautiful statues or some great works of art or some philanthropy and something truly great, something truly true. But that notwithstanding, I feel that the commitment towards population growth is a good one, and which is not to say that, I want to see a world with more slaves, but precisely because when we were introduced to and grappled with this fundamental question of what will the fourth industrial revolution be, when Schwab and these folks were talking about what is the fourth industrial revolution going to mean for our lives, they were saying immediately like depopulation, all these things. Are there still actors trying to insert this agenda? Yes. Are they actively working towards a coup? Yes. I mean, a coup in terms of policy. Do they want to maybe freeze the conflict in Ukraine and then really kick off some kind of, thermonuclear war in 2030, 2031, if they can get the right political players in place, and they can reduce population by, 1/16, 1/8, something like this, in in one of a number of scenarios. So I get all that. I understand the dangers on the horizon, but I think that cooler heads overall are prevailing on that front. And I make my assessments, and I think my optimism is based. I'm standing on business with it. Thank you.
No, yeah. See, this is what I like about this panel. We have that spectrum. We have different specialties, and definitely from your point of view, obviously, Xoaquin, you know how often I'm in your chat listening to your shows. Like between you, Tom, Matt, we have some of the hardest working people, Ben, on the internet. Like you guys are doing so much work. I appreciate that work, and so yeah, and I see a lot of what you're talking about with that rotation of elites. Things breaking, of course. I'm looking at the precious metals market, and that's when Tom, I'd love to hear you weigh in on this.
Sure.
In general, but the precious metal market seems to be kind of the indicator that things are changing in a big way. So please, Tom, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. And Merry New Year to everyone. Happy Christmas, all of that happy jazz. Let's get it out of the way. Fuck collapsitarianism. Fuck black pilling. We're winning in ways that we have never would have dreamed of. But, it's not happening fast enough because, we're going to turn a battleship around in a fucking fishbowl. That's what I say. And I'm just at that point with like listening to this bullshit. Like I'm listening to the anti-Israeli bullshit or any of it. It's all crap. Like the truth of the matter is that Trump is running the table on these people in ways that I'm literally like, President Trump, please, I can't eat a third ribeye today. I still feel that way. I felt that way the day after the inauguration. I still feel that way. I look around and all I see is a bunch of pathetic extended pretend from old Devosian and British remnant bullshit artists. And now having outed all of them as little complicit actors. Like for years, we had all these chameleons out there, the Steve Bannons, the Candace Owenses, all of these people were like pushing back and forth as they're playing their little Pied Piper game. So then when the shit really hit the fan and they lost on the One Big Beautiful Bill, on Israel, Iran, on the shutdown, on this, on that, on the Epstein files, they had to go crazy. And then they used Candace to like create insane, like Alex Jones is a kindness to talk about this stupidity that she put out there about Charlie Kirk's murder. Like all of that stuff is all horseshit. It's all horseshit. And so now let's transfer. Now you want to know why I think it's all horseshit? Nick, you brought it up. It's the precious metals market. Okay. Scott Bessent, from the moment he walked into the door at Treasury, began running a massive operation to cut London out of the global gold market, which they have controlled for centuries. Same thing is happening now in the second half of the year with silver. First half of 2026, the keyword's going to be copper. I called this, Vince Lonchi and I called this shit 2 years ago. We saw this stuff coming, and it's been playing out step by step by step. How do you do that? You weaken the dollar, you buy gold. You force delivery out of London into New York, and then hive off GLD and SLV as non-deliverable currency speculation markets, and then get rid of the LBMA, and then start targeting all of the industrial metals in the LME. Here's the big strategic picture, and all of the bullshit about Israel is all distraction. The real key to understanding this is to say, okay, who wants to be the two big industrial powers of the second half of the 21st century? And obviously China on the one hand, and now the United States on the other. Who still controls the pricing leverage of all the important industrial inputs around the world? Who controls the supply chains because of the pricing leverage that they have with the old exchanges? Who controls all that? Why should the 21st century industrial powers rely on a 19th or 18th century military and economic industrial power ability to control the price of all these commodity and industrial inputs? That's what London is. That's all London is. That's all the European Union is at this point. It's all what Zurich is. Zurich is nothing but a money laundering operation for gold and silver bullion to go to fucking London to then misprice all the assets around the world. Everything is downstream of the price that the fact that gold and silver are fundamentally mispriced. That oil is fundamentally mispriced because London controls the way that those pricing mechanisms exist. And it flows through Venezuela. It flows through the Canadian banks to all the stuff that Matt's talked about for years. And he did a great job on our podcast with Dexter White about 6 months ago. And Matt, by the way, we need to have you back on again, my friend. Same thing with Xoaquin. I think you and I are going to record in another couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about this stuff. This is really important, and it goes through Zurich, Shanghai, Hong Kong, as well as Singapore. And you want to know the biggest tell that this is all changing? Who just moved their 18 trading desks from London for precious metals to Singapore? JP Morgan. Why? They've been building the supply chain out in Singapore for years, and now they're ready to become the intermediary between the United States and China. And London's been trying to figure out where they're going to move their market from as they destroy the physical location and extract the final amount of wealth. And Ian Burlingame's step 7 of the financial skill chain, they're doing it to London. They're doing it to Eastern Canada. They're doing it to Australia. They're trying to do it to the US, and the US is saying, fuck off. And after they're done with that, they know they have to physically move London somewhere else. And they've been trying to move it to Dubai or Singapore or somewhere else. And I'm telling you, 2026 is going to be the most hilarious shit imaginable, because while everybody thinks that China is going to invade Taiwan, China is going to take Hong Kong back from the British.
I thought
that's your layout for 2026. And when Dexter White first said that to me, because Dexter White and I had a private conversation about this about 6 months ago, he's like, we were talking about all of this stuff, and he's like, well, then the optimal move, Tom, is for China to take Hong Kong back and tell the British, if you want to enforce your lease on Hong Kong for the next 13 years, bring the British Navy over and force us. We're moving into that kind of world where we are watching the merger of political power with military power and cutting the intelligence assets out of the mix. Okay, intelligence assets have been running the world for way too long, and masquerading as bankers, by the way, for way too long. That's the thing that we're going to start. That's the big fundamental sea change that I see, critical shift I see happening over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And Davos's play, as Xoaquin and others have pointed out, they got to go to war because they don't have any other options left. So they're going to start a a kinetic civil war in the United States. It may be the lamest civil war you ever watched, but it's going to happen. And the same thing, and it's going to be more extend and pretend in Europe over Ukraine. The thing I actually want to talk to you, all of the geopolitical guys about, and start thinking about it now is, does Europe really not want us to stay in NATO, or do they want us to leave?
Yeah, which Europe? But yeah, it's to what
well,
extent?
obviously Germany, France, the UK, not Italy, not Italy, Greece, and the Balkans.
They have elements of their establishment, like there are elements of their elite which understand that they're being that the pressures on the whole structure of Ukraine development and keeping Ukraine in Europe and all of the billions that they put into that. Of course, there's mechanisms and schemes which immediately, benefit those involved with kickbacks and all the games. But in terms of their future, this is like they cannot for example, the recent bond that they issued, the $90 billion bond, right? Who are the 3-4 main banks that are scheduled that actually were project managers on the creation of the structure of the Euro bond, right? HSBC, JP Morgan, etc. The top 4 or 5 that you would rattle off immediately, the usual suspects. And they are the ones that are pushing Europe to continually talk about, if there's going to be a ceasefire, we're going to deploy troops so that they keep the conflict going, because no one can agree to an end to a conflict on those terms. Like, that's not what the victor agrees to. So speaking of Russia. So my sense of things then is that they're holding on until they're hoping for a change midterm elections, 9 months, 10 months from now, enough to get the funding mechanism through the House, through the Congress, so to extend some, 30, 40 billion more, maybe 50 billion, maybe do that in the next year also. But if they can get about 100 billion more, to salvage some parts of Ukraine. Now, this is assumptions about that are not, I wouldn't, bet my bottom dollar on. I'm saying what they are going for, not what they're going to succeed at, but what they are going for is to hold on until 2030, elections in 2028 elections, 2029, you get the actual new presidency, and then it's going to take them, about a year to restart that conflict. So if Russia doesn't have that totally and completely finalized and solved by the time of that next American presidential election, then that's why you see Zelensky's, total inability to he's looking forward. You can say he's very optimistic, but I mean, that's his only real position, is to hold on. And meanwhile, the British have a game where they can take him out, put Zelensky in, and so on, threaten, use this mechanism. Who can pressure Zelensky to, commit ritual seppuku the fastest? So this is a very fun game that we're having.
I'd like to weigh in real quick.
Sure.
And thank you both. My soundbite in alignment with this is there's a lot of people in the political landscape of the U.S. who should be taking firmer steps to stop or interfere with the administration than they are. And as we're all familiar, and as many of us have said on our collective and independent programs, it's about for all of you in the audience, it's about outcomes versus what we see the media saying. And my view has always been pretty much most major elected officials in the U.S. are compromised in one way or another, and that just kind of has been the way it's always been. So if we have midterms in the United States who give the appearance of change, that doesn't mean we have change, because look how quickly most folks that are elected, even if they, not to be delicate, are not all that impressive a candidate or what have you, even they will get a knock on the door that says, for the low price of whatever, we'll put you in XYZ committee. In fact, there was a elected representative from Alabama who recently, about a year or so ago, I wouldn't say went public, but he gave a talk at like a local restaurant to his constituents, and it got out on YouTube, where he explained that if you want to be on a particular committee, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, they literally hand you a binder. and they say, if you want to be on the committee, this is how much it costs. If you want to be the chairperson of that committee, depending on what it is, here's how much it costs. It's all a racket. And so, his comment was, unless you're elected into office with a ton of money, you're going to have to get, because it's like a couple of $1 million that your own political party expects you to pay to get on these committees. So his comment was, immediately someone shows up with a check and says, and on the following pieces of legislation, this is how we expect you to vote. It's not always going to be necessarily something as nefarious as the intelligence community or foreign intelligence compromising somebody. It's your own political party and the people who run them. So
that's we'll
good
see.
Point,
by the way, yeah, that's a really good point. And the other thing I want to add to that is that, to the things I was talking about, is you have to realize that most members of Congress have no idea how the financial markets work, and they spend an awful lot of time being gaslit by financial bubble vision media, which and everybody around them, their hedge fund guys and their all the people that they know and their staffers who all that if we the United States do not continue to fund the liquidity of the world through deficit spending and this and all the crap that we've been doing, that everybody will dump their bonds on us, and then and they'll blow up our capital markets because they're morons and they don't realize that the 65% of the world still runs on dollars. And we think that tomorrow, that if that percentage were to drop to 63, that would be the end of the United States as we know it. So a lot of people just don't understand the fact that we have unbelievable levels of leverage militarily, diplomatically, and financially, and Trump has been proving that. That's what I mean by we won so many battles in 2025, and they were all right there in front of us because Trump blew apart all these old British and Anglo-Dutch shibboleths about tariffs don't work, this and that, and he blew it all apart. It's all gone, and we were expecting the world to fall apart, and none of it happened. And now what? So you have to change people's perspective over time, and that takes a while to build the political, the political upswell for him to then turn around and go, now I can use the military to put all these fucking people in jail. That's what's coming in half one 2026. But go ahead, Xoaquin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's just funny that you're saying this. I mean, I totally agree. And it's like when you think about most of the rhetorical and political pushback against tariffs from Democrats, though, makes the least amount of sense when you think about the history of American politics and the relationship between how progressives used to think about tariffs, or old school progressives, and not anti-liberal, but definitely you're talking about something like mercantilism as opposed to a laissez-faire, which would benefit maybe not the United States in every case. So it's a strange metric to see these classical liberal anti-tariff market-based arguments against tariffs, which tariffs with its deep and rich history in connection with populism and even metal populism, silver populism, gold populism. This goes back, a solid 130 years. Matt's the expert on this, but it's interesting to see the inversion of the discourse, and it's the lack of consistency in a lot of these political arguments. I think people who are paying attention are going, wait a minute, this is just dumb politics, and consequently, in the U.S., and you think about, as Tom was talking about, the dollar and the lack of appreciation that people have, that central banks of foreign governments still hold U.S. Treasury bonds in very high volumes, and in addition to that, of course, it's the primary trading currency in the world, a global reserve currency, even if it's a few points less, and it's like there's almost like a importation of mid-century modern anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-American belief system that people are projecting onto the econometric ideas of leaders of the developing world, as if they're against the dollar because of, plug it in. And I'm not saying ethically this is an incorrect thing to criticize, but saying, oh, the end of the dollar is coming because look at U.S. relationship with Israel, or the end of the dollar, all these countries are going to dump the dollar because of some, socio-political imperative, or because of U.S. Gunboat diplomacy. Well, no, all these countries are holding dollars, and if the United States can act predictably, if they can act rationally, if they can do the things that they say they're going to do and not do things that they haven't said they're going to do, in other words, predictable, then they're going to build confidence and trust. This is a long-term project. It's notional. It's fiat. I'm not even talking about, a particular view of monetary policy per se, but just the U.S. as a brand and how people intuitively or notionally associate the dollar with that country called the United States. There's a very strong correlation to the behavior of the present American administration and building that subtextual confidence in what the future of the U.S. will be, and ergo the dollar. So I just wanted to piggyback on what Tom was saying with those remarks.
CJ, did you dump some silver at 83 and upgrade your living room?
I did. How did you guess?
Looks good, man.
It looks fucking amazing.
Looks better than mine.
You took some profit down. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, good morning, buddy.
Yeah. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year, man. What was on your rate? What was the things that about 2025, and how's your outlook for 2026?
Yeah,
brother?
so truly an honor to be here, hanging out with some of the best minds and analysts, and understanding how the real world works. I think my assessment of 2025 is condensed to a few things, and I think more what's happened is you're seeing a whole different group of people now who are understanding that there is something wrong. There's something going on with the system. COVID woke up quite a few people with the lockdowns and so forth, but then you also have a huge rift of people who did support the movement with MAGA, that, hey, some things are going to be happening monumental. They're going to create such a significant shift. And now you're seeing that turmoil once again, that split, that divide that's happening in real time. And I look at a lot of things from more of a perspective of kind of an open mind. I don't try to, yes, I have my own ideologies, my own belief system, but I also look at things from a different perspective of when I hear that things are going to be better, going great, I like to look for structural things that are happening, some structural changes. And I think last year what we saw was even more of a conquer of the middle class. We saw another great wealth extraction, and I totally get that the government in itself has to continue to spend, because GDP is the government spending is such a significant part of GDP, and that's why that they do those things. But I think every election cycle that we have, and I can't remember what economists that stated this, that like you look at China and Russia, and one of the reasons they're able to have this big massive plan and it scopes over decades is because they don't have interim 4-year elections like we have here in the United States. There's not enough of an election cycle to really move those patterns forward. We have one administration that puts policies in place. It shifts over 4 to 8 years, and then it goes back to that dynamic. And that's why we have that struggle here. Now, I'm not saying that we need to, go to a monarchy, but, maybe we do look at, shifting terms of presence here in the United States from 4 years to 8 years and 2 terms, so that we can see more strategies go more, long-term versus a condensed 4 years. And perhaps maybe at one point, elections here in the United States, they need to be evaluated. Like, you think of companies and organizations. All of us have been in different organizations. We've seen restructuring. We've seen departments cut. We've seen consolidation. But when you look at federal government overall, we haven't seen a whole lot of that. Yes, there's closing of the Department of Education or so forth. But why do we need to have this federal government that operates within its own entity? And there's too many people that look at the route to becoming a Congress or senator involves, that wealth of being able to manipulate and able to get away with a lot of the criminality that exists in Washington, D.C. So that's, my 2025 in a recap. I struggle to pinpoint to say, hey, these were wins walking out of 2025. One thing I do know is that when you look at the Ukraine crisis that occurred, Russia taught a very valuable lesson to the rest of the world. And that is that literally you can ignore the West. You can ignore the sanctions. You can ignore all the amount of military pressure that's involved. And the rest of the world has realized that. There's no reason that when the U.S. bombs Iran or the U.S. threatens Venezuela, because why are they going to interrupt the country that's in decline? There's no reason to do that, because they're focused on their own goals and moving things forward. And they know that the moment they engage with any type of military escalation, is they understand that that's what the United States wants. That's what they want. So don't engage with it. Russia's been very patient. Like every step of the way, from the assassinations to the blowing up of public buildings, bridges, they have been very patient. And I've been a critic of Putin. I'm like, gosh, the only thing that the West recognizes is violence. That's the only thing that they respect is those type of actions. They don't do it with soft diplomacy, but Russia's been able to do that for the most part. And they've given the rest of the world a blueprint on how to ignore the West and move forward.
CJ, the way to ignore the West is to have fucking nukes. I mean, so they could scream and shout all they want, but they're not fucking invading China and Russia.
No,
they're not invading Pakistan. So the block that's forming, that people have been screaming about for years and years, is solidifying. The BRICS and their affiliates are solidifying. So the sanctions that once destroyed a country 10 years ago, 5 years ago, are becoming less and less effective. So people could be optimistic. Again, people could say, we're the black pill's gay or whatever the fuck you want to say. But at the end of the day, when I see fucking Ukrainian Jewish oligarchs dancing on a fucking beach in Tel Aviv after money laundering fucking $300 billion, sorry, I don't fucking live in fantasy land. My fucking eyes work. When I see people getting shipped off after being fucking arrested for fucking pedophilia and molesting kids back to Tel Aviv because they're in a special fucking class, my fucking eyes work. So I don't live in fucking fantasy land. I live in who gets the fucking handcuffs land. And there's groups in this country that don't get fucking handcuffs, regardless if they get caught doing illegal shit. Some of us get handcuffs and SWAT teamed and live in fucking fear. If we say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, we have to treat people like we're constantly being set up in some dragnet or whatever. So the world, the only people left afraid of the West are the citizens that live underneath its fucking tyranny.
Yep.
Countries that could defend themselves aren't afraid of the West anymore. They didn't bend the fucking knee with the tariffs. Some did, but those are ones who, again, don't have fucking nukes. Most didn't. So, let's see. Hopefully, again, I'm in gold and silver and Bitcoin. I'm just fine with all this bullshit. It's not as though I'm, but when I text you and fucking V, it's anecdotal. But when I go into a grocery store a couple hours ago and I see a fucking DiGiorno frozen pizza for $12 fucking dollars, and I know what the average employee earns in this country, or I see a beer at a fucking Cubs game for $18, and everyone wants to say everything's going to be fucking amazing. It's like, I don't know if it is going to be fucking amazing. A Five Guys order cost me $50 for 3 people. It's like, are things really going to be amazing? Are you sure? Is everyone earning $250,000 now? Does everyone have a net worth over $5 million? Is everything going to be fucking amazing? I don't think so. So let's see how it plays out. My thesis would be that they're gutting the middle class.
Yep. And
it's going to be upper class and lower class. And, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm fucking wrong. Either way, I'm protected. But I don't know if the average 25-year-old's protected. I don't know if the average 35-year-old's protected.
That's the interesting argument. And I'm glad you brought it up, because the argument is that they're gutting the middle class. No, dude. They already fucking gutted the middle class. It's over. They've been doing it since 2008. That's what putting Fannie and Freddie into fucking conservatorship was about, and destroying the housing market. That's what Dodd-Frank was about, making sure that small business owners didn't get access to fucking capital. That's what zero-bound interest rates were. the antipode to that is the beginning of the process of having to bleed off the egregious fiscally induced inflation, which has been done through the monetary system, i.e., the Powell and higher for longer. And then the next part of that is to begin the process of unwinding that. And that's a fucking 20-year process. But the middle class is already over. The biggest level up for me in 2024 was all of us keep talking about, when is the United States going to hit rock bottom? I'm like, we already hit rock bottom, folks. We're done. We've already lost the country. Now we're trying to get it fucking back, and they're fighting us tooth and claw, and everybody's still acting like, oh no, they're still gonna crow. Now, the same fucking people are still running around trying to loot everything. Of course they are. But there are literal people now trying to do the opposite of that, and that's where we are. And that process is hard because these people are embedded at every freaking level, and you're going to have to beat them. And the only thing that we have that the president truly has control over are the agencies, under the executive agencies, which the judiciary believes that they have control over. One, which we had to spend an entire year redefining the Article 2 powers of the fucking president of the United States. And then the second is the military. And everything else is kayfabe. That's all that matters.
I will agree. I will agree with a very specific point that, and I believe you alluded to this earlier, someone else did. Without an industrial base, the middle class will never return. Yeah, exactly. Without an industrial base, and I don't know if this country is heading towards an industrial base or if it's heading more towards AI dick pic apps or whatever the fuck we make now.
I don't buy that. I see AI as a fucking bubble, and the whole AI build out is nothing more than an excuse to actually replace the aging electrical grid. That's all I see. Like AI is going to be dick pics, and then we're going to find out that it's really lame and that it's not all that interesting. And at the end of the day, A/B testing is something that we do humans do on a daily basis, and that's all the freaking algorithms do. And we're like, okay, once that wears off, and we can get rid of all the useless white collar guys who've been doing the A/B testing, and we can automate that through AI. Everything else is, that's the biggest. It's not blue collar jobs that are going away with robots and all the rest of that stuff. It's the useless middle managers. It's the cornflower tie guy that Edward Norton, beat himself up in front of in Fight Club. That guy has no skills. That's the guy we have to worry about.
I don't live in the DC or Virginia area, but I live in Naples, Florida, surrounded by Gen Xers and boomers with a shit ton of money. So when you're sitting at a fucking steakhouse or a bar and you're hearing these people, they're impervious to it. Everyone's fucking wearing a fucking Rolex, a Patek, eating a fucking steak, drinking a martini. But if you corner the waiter or the bartender who's 25 or 30 and you have a conversation with them, they're the ones who are the grievance. And why am I bringing this up? Because if you're a 25, 30, 35-year-old and you're watching these 100 billion flying around there, trillion, all on, promissory notes from Ellison to Altman to NVIDIA to whatever the fuck. And you're like, dude, I can't pay my fucking FPL electric bill. Like, I can't pay that. So these kids are fucking struggling, and it explains why whatever the fuck his name is got it in New York City. They'll believe anything. They
Mamdani.
Yeah, they want some sort of pressure. They want a pressure release. They don't give a fuck about the ideology. They'll become nihilistic. They'll buy whoever's selling whatever. If they're just like, listen, enough with this fucking 100 bill there, trill there. Like, dude, I gotta suck dick to fill up my fucking gas tank. Like, these are the kids that'll fucking believe anything, right?
Would you like the other side of that? I split time now between rural North Florida, okay, and really fucking rural Central Tennessee. Like, I'm worried enough about the coming zombie apocalypse that I have a place up in rural Tennessee, the kind of Tennessee where guys who were stationed in the military in Alaska went, wow, this is remote. And yet there's fiber, but that's a different story. I have a 19-year-old daughter. She's going to be 20 in April. And I can tell you that I've been watching that entire process and having the conversation with her about all this. And she's not on board with a lot of what I think. Reason being, because she's expressing exactly the same fears and worries that you're just describing. And I said, our goal as a commentariat, as an administration, as the leadership, as fathers, for all intents and purposes. Our job is to sell you on the idea that we understand the problem and we're trying to fix it. But it's a big fucking problem and it's going to take a long time and it's not going to be easy. But as long as things are moving in the right direction and we bind together as people and as communities and families, we can get through this. I grew up in the fucking 70s, dude. I grew up in grew up in upstate New York, the son of a cop and a freaking nurse, watching the 70s inflation gut my family. I got the childhood PTSD and all of the coping mechanisms to prove it. Hi, welcome to my $3 Maduro. Okay, that's the world that these kids are moving into times 4, and it shaped most of all of our experiences. And now we have to harness that and say, we got through that, we understand the problem, and we have your back. And are we going to fight about all the little shit? Yes. Are we, is Trump going to make 100% good moves? No. Why? Because he can't. Because the world's fucking complicated. That's the way I see this. So watch what the structure of what they're trying to accomplish, see that for what it is, which is literally to bring back manufacturing, to bring back a middle class, to bring back the control over the long end of the yield curve, which they took away from us when they took Fannie and Freddie off the market, and the short end of the yield curve when we were at the zero bound. And we've gotten the control of the short end. Now we got to get control of the long end. Then we can start repricing all of these. Now we can start pricing this stuff properly. We can kick all the fucking illegals out of this country, which raise the marginal cost of everything, food, housing, healthcare, everything by 40. That's where the marginal cost increase over the last 4 years was. You bring in 20 friggin' million people and you don't change the supply chains, and you don't think that the law of supply and demand doesn't raise the price of everything by 30%.
If I might referee,
they were cutting back meat production, dude. They were not even sustaining the supply chain. You think there's certain areas they were reducing supply while increasing population.
Yeah, and trying to reduce supply chains. Exactly. We still haven't brought the 2.5 million barrels of diesel refining back online that we lost during COVID. I mean, it's gone. It hasn't come back yet. And Congress is sitting there every day and the agencies are sitting there every day trying to do everything imaginable to stop any of this from happening. These departments, these executive departments are so fucking corrupt that it's going to take 18 months just to clear them out to the point where we can start doing real work. That's the reality. I'm sorry it sucks, but that's true.
Well, yeah, and so this begs the question, and you made the comment earlier, Tom, that we've already seen rock bottom. I think some of us on the panel might agree that we have not yet seen rock bottom. And that's, I've actually consumed a lot of your content, Tom. I lurk in the background very quietly, been a fan for years. So I would ask, what was rock bottom and what are we doing to fix it?
Rock bottom was the Biden-Trump debate and then the attempted assassination. At that point, we have the rise of tranny culture. We have DEI having gutted all of the corporate boards in America. We have starter homes peaking at $270,000 a piece. That's for a 1969 1,200 square foot block house on a third of an acre in a bad neighborhood, right? Gun prices are $1,000. You want a decent gun in America, it costs $700, right? When I used to cross shop this shit 5 years ago, even during the supply chain problems during COVID, I could still get halfway decent guns for $400, $500. Now it's almost impossible to get anything decent other than slightly unreliable off-brands, snub-nosed 38s for that I used to pay that were ubiquitous through shadow at $250 a piece or $459 on buds. It's retarded, right? So we have that was rock bottom. We had no government. We had an auto pen for a president. We had 5 or 6 agency department branches of government running the auto pen. So Elizabeth Warren was in charge of the auto pen for banking, and Pete Buttigieg was in charge of transportation, and this one was in charge of that, and blah, 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 blah. And there's a bunch of fucking literal goddamn globalists and Marxists running this fucking country and shoveling trillions of dollars out the back goddamn door, knowing full well that if they lost the election, that they were all going to be found, and then they pardoned themselves on the way out the door. I think July 2024 was the day when I finally realized, I'm like, how much worse does it have to get? Nobody can afford food. Nobody can afford a house. We can't agree on fucking gender. We can't agree on anything. We have 100,000 people a year dying from fentanyl poisoning. And I'm sure the alcoholism numbers are even worse, right? All of that. All this screams to me is Russia to 1999. That's what it screams to me. And
Right.
so if you want my honest opinion, I'm like, if the conversations that Putin and Trump have had privately together have been more about what did you do to get control of Russia in 2000 when you took over? How did you pull it off? What do I have to do to stop this? Because the exact same set of circumstances, the exact same fucking people, the Bill Browders and the Edmund Saffers and all the names have slightly changed, the Epsteins and all those fucking people were running the same operation in Russia through the late 90s and in the early days of 2000. And
The answer to your question is Putin gave oligarchs handcuffs. That's the answer to your question.
Yep.
So he grabbed the oligarchs and said,
he gave one oligarch the handcuffs. He forced everybody else onto the table. He did not take Oleg Deripaska and put him in handcuffs.
It doesn't take
my pen back.
It doesn't take a purge. It takes one or two to say playtime's over. There's a difference. There's a distinction.
Yeah, you make an example of them.
Yeah, there's a distinction between money and power. Power is the SWAT team. Yeah.
Right, and what I'm trying to say is that, and I hate to dominate here, because I really want to hear like what Matt has to say and something else. But I'll make this final point. The way I've been reading what Trump has been doing on the world stage is to flip all of these former enemies into assets or chaos providers into assets. I see him having flipped Netanyahu. And now Netanyahu gets to be the bad guy every time Trump wants something done that is distasteful. That's what I'm seeing. Okay. Now, I think he's done the same thing in many ways with the Ayatollah in Iran, and I don't think the Ayatollah has 3 months left to him. And like I see it, he's trying to flip Erdogan, he's trying to flip Jelani, he's trying to flip the Qataris, he's trying to flip literally Maduro. Maduro is captured. He's not a real thing. If Trump wanted Maduro out of Caracas, he would have done it a month ago. He doesn't have the right force there to do what he says he wants to do. None of the military assets that are there make any friggin' sense other than for what he's actually doing. And what he's trying to do is collapse the network that has been using Maduro as the figurehead and as the figurehead for all of the corruption. And he's trying to get all of that wiped out, the silver trade, the oil trade, the drugs, all of that stuff. And then leave Maduro in place, because then Maduro becomes a loyal subject. Better to take somebody. It's the mob model. You got a guy who's working against you. Better to flip him than to get rid of him. And the guys that won't play ball, you get rid of. And I think Zelensky's about done. Right.
Sure. So, and let me referee here for a minute. So, Veles, I think you wanted to weigh in on this really quick, and then let's hear from Ben and Matt, because we haven't heard from them in a minute.
Sure. And thank you, Tom and Gus, for a lively discussion. First 2 points for me. And for those of you on the panel, as well as in the audience who may not have heard me before, I've been working on the West Coast for the last couple of years, working with a couple of universities that are dealing with some operational administrative challenges they're dealing with. One of the things I often get to hear is students addressing school officials. Now, granted, yes, it's the West Coast and there's that whole dynamic. But that said, I have noted the increasing number of students who have been arguing with school officials about, basically, for lack of a better word, finding them jobs. Now, I know some will say, well, it's because they've got the wrong degrees. And yes, that does play a role in some cases. But after having lived through 88 and 91 and 2008, and the list goes on, to me, it's more an indicator of the weakness in the economy. Is a contributing factor, and it goes to the discussion we've been having. The second item is on the overall theme of some things we've been covering is there are, and to that discussion that just took place, As a former both contractor to defense firms as well as working in Washington for a number of years, there is graft and fraud in the government and the economy far beyond what anyone is aware of. And I know that Elon Musk, among others, has recently made a statement that I think he said somewhere between 1% to 3% of the GDP is probably fraudulent, and a number of folks have said that may be a very conservative figure. That's the sort of thing you can laugh about until you realize how much money we're really talking about and how much of an impediment to the effectiveness of the economy in our lives that is. So my question is how much of that reality will be allowed, keyword, to come to light in 2026, and what the public's reaction might be? Because I think, especially after the coup, we've got a whole segment of the populace out there that just is non-playing characters, NPCs, or from the Matrix. They don't want to be unplugged. And I think for many of those folks, it may break them like an eggshell, that it'll just be too much for them to understand the system. With that, I yield the floor.
Briefly, before we move on to Ben and Matt, Gus, since you were kind of talking with Tom there for a bit, I wanted to give you a chance to retort with anything before we kind of move on.
Well, no, I think what Veles said is perfect, but let me add to that at the end is what the public's prepared to tolerate based on new discovery things that come to light. I don't know how optimistic I am to anything being done about it, because look what the public's tolerated thus far the last 10 years. I always take 2020 as the 1 year that I'm like, holy fuck, how did Americans put up with this fucking shit? Like, they're going to burn churches while they have a diaper on your baby, letting people loot and riot and burn down cities. And we're just going to take it up the ass, and they're going to count votes at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night. Like, 2020 was for me was like this was a docility and aptitude test. And so, Veles, to your point, I think, yes, I think they'll keep exposing things like the Somali thing, and it doesn't matter what rock you turn, and you're like, oh, there's a $100 billion scam. There's a $50 billion scam. There's a $400 billion scam. Dude, we need fucking SWAT teams and handcuffs. That's it. Like, Trump got back in. People put Trump back in for fucking justice. Like, people want fucking handcuffs, period. Like, enough talk, enough tweets, enough this, enough that. We agree with you. Kick someone's fucking door down. Like, let me see some fucking handcuffs. Enough with, I don't need to see 10 people deported a day. I don't give a shit. Like, give me some fucking handcuffs. And I think everyone wants that. People who like are plugged in have been seeing this for fucking 10 years, and we just want fucking justice. They have us walking on fucking eggshells with everything we say, everything we do. We need lawyers. We need accountants. I need fucking bookkeepers. I need to hire all these people to make sure I'm playing by the fucking rules. We just want justice on the other side. Like, that's it. So Veles, I think more will come to light, but are we going to get our fucking pound of flesh? Are we going to get some fucking justice or what? Like, that's what everyone wants. I think everyone agrees to. I don't think that should be a debatable thing. I mean, it's not controversial. So that's my, I hope more comes to light, but I want to see something done about it.
Well said.
Can I, Ben, well, I know Ben was waiting. I don't want to cut in. But
no, I mean, go ahead. I had a couple thoughts, but I'll let you lead off.
All right. Well, I do think that part of why China enjoys the type of mass support it does from the population of China is because they've been able to see with their own eyes a massive takedown, a massive anti-corruption program with their own eyes that has resulted in like several ministers of justice, 2 heads of Interpol, 2 Central Committee, effectively the Chinese CIA heads who have gone into like full-blown life sentences, some death sentences, and there's been 4.9 million party members who have been purged, some facing, again, just the wildest sentences. And these are like, when you look at their bios, what they were a part of as far as incubating and growing this deep state apparatus that brought in the transhumanists around Eric Lee, around Jack Ma, who again is, a total transhumanist ideologue. Like that's his religion, as he was recruited by Lee back in whatever the 90s to become motivated to recreate humankind according to a certain Davos program. He's a World Economic Forum trustee, or he was before he was taken down, when he was calling for an economic effective coup d'etat to destroy the Chinese state banking system. So they basically, use the power and the force of the nation state to wield the law in a manner that actually started like purging the swamp in a really visceral way. It's quite dramatic. And it was similar in spirit. This speaks to a little bit of what CJ was saying. When I look at what made Franklin Roosevelt viable, why did people why did he earn the trust of the American people in the 30s? It was largely because he did the Pecora Commission. Like he fully sanctioned, gave the full state backing to Ferdinand Pecora, who then tore down. Like they gave full blown subpoenas to Pecora and his team to just go in and force J.P. Morgan's books to open up and to demonstrate how these guys gamed the entire market, how they built up the bubbles of the 20s, how they had their preferred clients list that even had like Calvin Coolidge and Hoover and like the president. I don't know about J. Edgar Hoover. I think he was too busy cross-dressing. But, you had this whole like disgusting thing where these people on the preferred clients list were able to like sell their stocks before the bubble was blown, before the broker call loans were all called in on a synchronized moment in 1929. So there was the building up of the bubble, the destruction of the protective tariff as soon as Coolidge comes into power over the dead body of the former president. They immediately start you have Mellon coming in, just deregulating like crazy, opening up for it's the roaring 20s. So they build up these bubbles, they're asset stripping, they're doing a wealth transfer. Then they blow the bubble, but everybody on the preferred clients list gets to sell short or sell before the bubble hits. Prescott Bush makes a fortune. And all of these assholes who are part of this operation that is exposed by FDR under the Pecora Commission, they're also bankrolling fascism. Like they're the ones bankrolling a perverse kind of nationalism that they're liking, as far as what Oswald Mosley is doing in Britain. And by the way, Oswald Mosley's grandson, Louis Mosley, if anybody wants to know what this guy's up to these days, that's a worthwhile thing to check out. Google Louis Mosley, because he's the head of Palantir. He's the CEO of Palantir UK.
Operation Paperclip 3.0.
Yeah. Right up there with the MI6 director, right? It's the hellspawn of these unreconstructed Nazis who are still in play, right? But you have this perverse nationalism that's being sold by these same assholes who are pushing for the destruction of the banking system. In all of its forms. Prescott Bush is pouring tons of cash into the growth of the Nazi apparatus. The Nazis are doing protective tariffs too. It's just that they've got a different idea based upon what type of world they want to create and impose onto humanity on behalf of the higher, banking echelons, even above the so-called official Nazi occultists running the Thule Society and shit like that. So that's still in play. You got the same thing going on in the US. There's Nazi rallies in Madison Square Garden, 29,000 people strong, coming in annually throughout the 1930s, going to these Nazi rallies with Pellet, what's his name? William, doesn't matter. But you have these like the silver shirts, right? You got the actual like hard American fascists that are putting, George Washington up there with Hitler and swastikas, selling this idea that that's what real nationalism is, as they're trying to kill FDR, like commissioning his assassination twice and the business coup. So you got this whole thing, but FDR was able to do kind of what China's been able to do more recently by just forcing the full exposure and forcing the media to cover the full exposure of how they gamed the system, created the bubble, pushed fascism, and was able to use that leverage in order to force some better behavior amongst his enemies, who were then forced to abide by the national law. He even got the Federal Reserve to start, like he put his own guy in there, right? Forgot his name all of a sudden. But he put his own guy, Mariner Eccles, and forced them to start abiding by the demands and the needs of the nation. For the first time since 1913, he got the Reconstruction Finance Corporation as functioning kind of like a national bank, emitting even more loans and credit for the development of the nation than all of the Wall Street banks that were like trying to choke the credit system. They were trying to undermine the nation. You had the City of London, speculating against the US dollar, like playing all sorts of shenanigans, trying to like keep the US dollar weak throughout that entire period. But the New Deal that he was able to bring in utilize the sovereign nation state in order to do kind of like what China's doing with the Belt and Road Initiative, except, it had its own American coloring and flavor around, the Four Quarters projects, like really big projects that you could then measure the corruption of the administrators who were assigned to oversee the projects. And if people were in responsible positions, and whether it's the Tennessee Valley Authority or whatever, there are many different, administrations created to get the jobs done of the Hoover Dam and the rural electrification projects and the big water. There are thousands of these things, some mega, some small. But if they weren't getting the job done, then they could be held accountable. As we've seen now, and that's how China's been able to moderate its own. Like that's where they've been able to fire or reward their administrators in China because they've been able to either get the job done under budget, on time, against time. Is there corruption or is there not? Or what's holding it back from getting done? They just want to get the jobs done. So we've lost those standards.
Sorry to interrupt, but in the spirit of just getting the job done, right? Because we're in a time where there's a lot of people, and I sympathize with Gus. I want to see handcuffs. Why isn't it happening?
Yeah.
Why do you get people who are, committing heinous crimes? Like there was a guy who was caught trying to bait a 14-year-old into some lewd act.
Israeli cybersecurity head.
Yeah.
That's what he was, and spirited off to Israel before he came.
I like to also add one thing, just as a note, in what Tom mentioned about one oligarch being arrested. It wasn't one. There was about 7 that's documented during Putin's rise, and anywhere between 8 to 12 executives and cohorts that were taken down in handcuffs. There's about 5 to 7 oligarchs were arrested, big ones. And then,
thank you.
And let me
real quick. I want to see handcuffs too, guys. But
Yeah.
What I want to see is what Matt's talking about first, because that's what gives the hope to the kids that Gus brought up earlier. It's order of operations. Right? It's all these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's order. Yeah, you always talk
it's
about
not exclusive, but you definitely need the Pecora Commission and the mass. Hundreds of bankers went to jail in 1934 and 35 under Pecora. But so it's not like exclusively one or the other. But Matt, I was just going to say, like, the reason why they imposed the term limits as well was as soon as FDR died and was killed. I think he was killed as soon as his body wasn't even like cold yet. That's when Truman comes in and imposes the term limits because they want to make sure that there's never going to be the emergence of another type of leader in America that can think multi-generationally and plan accordingly. They like that idea of keeping things myopic and short-sighted so we can stay unbalanced.
Matt, do you think
Matt, could be undone with enough anger, and it would take, as many of us in this room have said, it would take what would be considered perhaps authoritarian actions by a sitting president or similar. But I know, Ben, you and I were sitting having a cigar. What was it, last month?
Yeah,
and the comment you made struck home in that we're getting to a point, and this might upset some people in the room, where it's not happening fast enough, not because I want it to happen faster, but because time's running out. And we're going to get to a point where a lot of people are going to say, just fix it, and they don't care how. Ben, do you want to, and Matt, I'm sorry to take it away from you, and we can come back to you on that because I want to hear your thoughts on it too, but I want to give Ben a moment here to kind of let us know how he feels about that.
Yeah, I think this kind of follows up with what Gus was saying, where like I'd be totally fine if we skipped the handcuffs and went straight to heads on pikes, because that's kind of where I see things being right now. But it kind of comes back to what I call like the burn it down politics of like the current situation, where if things aren't going to change, then you're not going to have people continuing to buy into the system. And then it gets into like, at what point do they start to lose legitimacy in the eyes of the people, all those different things. And it kind of comes down to one point where if our politicians and ruling class, oligarchs, like faction of these elites, whatever you want to phrase it as, like, do they rule in the best interest of the people of the country, or are they like working for themselves or working for other factions, other governments, right? And you see all the stuff when people mention the fraud, like the Somali stuff and like the H-1B stuff, immigration, right? You have all these problems. And if you don't start to see any progress, then you kind of get the reaction of, okay, well, like, what's the point? Like, why should, like, the Trussell plan is like the meme of believing what's going on. But at some point, you're just going to say enough's enough and like realize, okay, like, nothing's going to change and see where it goes from there. But I think there's a lot of things that are heading in the right direction, but there's some things where, like, if you don't make any progress, then people are just going to say, like, why turn up for the midterms? Like, why do I bother voting for this thing if it's just going to be more of the same, right? If they're not going to do anything, like, if Trump wants a win for early 2026, right, just go after what's going on with Somalia, right, and start deporting people, and you see where that goes. And, like, I think that's a layup for 2026. But if they don't do anything about it, after it was served up on a silver platter by what's his name, Nick Shirley, right? If they don't do anything about it, then it's just going to be on to the next problem, right? And that's where, right, it goes to Charlie Kirk. It goes to all these things that have happened over the last 12 months where it's like, okay, there's a opportunity there, and then it's just kind of swept under the rug, move on to the next one, and it gets forgotten about in the short-term, like, news cycle that happens every, month or two. So that's kind of where my head's at on it. And if they don't make these changes, then you're just going to see more people where it's like, all right, well, what's the point?
Ben, and in the spirit of giving everybody a chance here, Xoaquin, we haven't heard from you in a minute. And I think that this conversation, it's a really polarizing one. And I'm kind of in the middle of it. I tried to take in everything. And, a lot of the progress that's been made behind the scenes that, Tom, you're pointing out in markets. So for, everything that's been going on with the plumbing, that all sounds good. But again, I'm concerned that we're not seeing what the population needs to see in order to have trust and give us good chances in early 2026. Xoaquin, you have a very unique view, where you are and your experiences and everything else. Where do you fit in this? Do you think that something big needs to happen before the midterms to even have a chance? Do you think anything is going to happen? Like, where are you at with all this?
I think that the political structure in the United States is still an event that is mediating these conflicts, and I think there are interests. I think there are some good vested interests compared to the alternative. Just within its lesser of two evils, if you will, that are trying to use the existing mechanisms, the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, laws, elections, and then there's a strong impulse to pull things away from the electoral, actually into the extra legal arena of getting out of what comes out of elections. And the reason I say this is because in the history of systems and countries, when there is a world out there to exploit, when there are numerous opportunities, the latent divisions which always exist within elites are not as heavily expressed. But when the crisis becomes real, then the crisis between elites takes on that form. So even though we're so right when we describe the virtual reality of the uniparty, kayfabe, the political arena as theatrics, but we have seen as things were deconstructing, in the past 5 years, 6 years. I mean, think about the 2020 process and that election. If these different alignments and visions of different inter-elite, contra-oligarchical forces if that's not a reality, then why did we have what we had across the United States with, the BLM Antifa riots, moving things away, the Transition Integrity Project, John Podesta, the threat to have states secede if Trump became the president in 2020, the policies that were driven so hard, by the Otto Penn administration on Ukraine, the invasion and Holocaust in Gaza happens, made possible by the Biden regime, right? So, I look at those things. I fully concur that we need to have some handcuffs, heads on pikes, etc. Comments that CJ was making, that Gus was making, that Matt was making, that Tom appeared to sign off on, I think as well, that we need a period of stability. You need, a concentration of force that can stand above and can bring like order to the chaos. And it's not something that can happen in 4 years or 5 years. We're talking about a long-term project. Now, the reason I look at the constitutional system and the reality of elections and their meaning to be a preferred fighting place for a sector of the elites that are having this conflict is that it keeps things in the realm of, okay, here's a judge. Can this judge be bribed, or can this judge be, this is very different than machine guns in the street. Now, there's a fine line there, and you might, in the, some of the deconstructing states, or you want to call them banana republics, failed states, or whatever, yeah, you're going to have obviously a combination of machine guns, assassinations, and judges that are swayed by political influences. But so long as you have a legal system with judges and doing these things, elections and so forth, that have outcomes that are determinative on who has power, right? Who has power, political power, right? Who has the right to monopoly of force, right? This is like law. So this is the one thing that can bring order to the chaos of individual owners, individual interests, and so forth. The idea that the oligarchy or the elite have one plan or one objective, and that all of these different contradictions between the verticals of their different industries, which rise and fall. Sometimes because the other fell, the other rises. I mean, so what keeps them on the same page, right? You need, and I would concur. There's a political solution here in terms of bringing order to it. Now, whether I would agree with Tom that fundamentally the worst part in this. In terms of the middle class and the structure of things, it's we're reading the obituary. We're not reading a prognosis of a disease that's on the on the horizon, or that the patient now has, or whatever. Like we're conducting an obituary, and like people like me, like, nothing left to fucking lose. So there's nothing. But at a certain point, it's like you have why I think that the political conflict in the United States can be contained is that there is a bluff, right, that the Trump power group can call on these limp-wristed liberals, which is that they are not going to be able to take things beyond passing it off as some sort of like anarcho, pyrotechnic show in areas that they're just going to invest to redevelopment, these conspiracies that happen at the level of the city council, right? That all these planned demolitions, basically. We're going to see that in New York, right? That Mamdani, he's going to be known as like the pyrotechnic king of fucking New York pretty soon. Like there's going to be shit on fire, and it's going to be like, oh, this is because it's some public housing thing, we didn't put enough money in it, and they're going to make it seem like some left-wing thing about public housing when they're actually burning it down, and they're going to redevelop it and sell the property. It's going to come under eminent domain or whatever. And so
real briefly, sorry to jump in here, Matt, first of all, I know you've got to go here pretty quick, so let's give you a chance to say goodbye, and also, as always, thank you for coming and giving us your extraordinary understanding of history.
Oh, thanks. I would have loved to have stayed on for another hour. I just have something in 3 minutes I got to be on. But no, it was a pleasure. It was an honor. I'll definitely watch the recording. So it was, and also just the thing, just to wrap up a thought that I really wanted to just close that thought that I'd had earlier, is just that the important thing that I think is really at the heart of the matter is the fight for the sovereign nation state. Yes. And what that means as a sovereign institution, as a nation state, because that's the reason why the entire oligarchy has been animated by a certain idea of world government transcending the nation state, restoring feudalism for the past centuries. That's been the primary top-down motive, and creating a new culture with new religious institutions that are more manageable by a top-down elite, a new restored priesthood that externalizes its hierarchy at a certain moment of controlled crisis. And that's the sort of thing that I think we should just be on our guard for. And if the sovereign nation state is used as a power of offense and defense, the way FDR used it or the way China uses it today, and the protective tariff, national banking is animated by the actual principles it contained within the Constitution and the Declaration, then you can get a very, very good outcome. Right now, I'm just not seeing enough of that. That's my one critique, I would say, for Trump and his people, is that I don't see the concrete projects, the actual goals that I saw with the times that America was viable under JFK or FDR or Lincoln. There was concrete goals to get things done and to give people a multi-generational mission that I'm not seeing to direct the behavior of the protective tariff and the credit. And I know I'm opening up a can of worms by saying that, but that's my only critique. If I had a critique, Glass-Steagall, dealing with this giant bubble economy by breaking up the banks before they blow up in our face. I'd like to see more of that. But otherwise, I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of fun with those tidbits to use as kindling.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd say you have another form of just fix it politics. You want to see the projects come, but before you go, Matt, let us know where we can find you.
CanadianPatriot.org. That's a place where all my videos and books are located.
Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and all
Happy
the
New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.
And before we move on, CJ, you're next, but Xoaquin, I interrupted you, so I wanted to give you a moment to put a pin in anything.
Sure. Well, just, thanks for that. I just look at, I look at the interelite conflict in the United States, and I see that being able to utilize, norms, laws, rule of law, things like this, Constitution, elections, to determine winners, and to determine power, is a viable mechanism. It's one that is definitely a favorable enough realm of combat that at least one of the groups in conflict sees utility in. There are historical reasons for that. Like, I think sometimes we think that constitutions or concepts of separation of powers are random or arbitrary, but I would argue, not the first one, of course, that these relate to real human power dynamics, and you see this spelled out like in Federalist 10, Federalist 20. So I think those reflect that there are, understanding that there are real divisions and real crises, and that this is where the domain that happens. And the fact that we've had a simulation of a uniparty conflict for so many decades, when the United States was maintaining in some kind of slow motion decline from the mid 70s onward, this hegemonic appearance and reality, starting with probably 2007, 2008 in the U.S. with the housing market crash, and then Russia goes into Georgia. No one can stop them. They handle it. This really was a big shift in how we understand the role of the U.S. in power projection in the world. And then when there was a failure in 2013 to actually go in and bomb Syria, Obama put it on the British Prime Minister. British Prime Minister did a strange thing, and he says, "Oh, let's put it to the Parliament." Parliament votes no, and so these things were, I say, these moments, the bluff was called on the Western Empire, and these are the critical moments in history. We look back and say, okay, this is where there was a big difference. So those crises among Western elites are real existing divisions. It's not a simulation to assassinate Trump. It's not a simulation, the lawfare. It's not a simulation. Does it involve the medium of those things? Does it involve the mediums of simulation, in terms of how we perceive it, as in the sense of like hyper reality, and in the sense of fucking Baudrillard or something? Yes, it's also all fake too. At the same time, it is symbolic. What we're seeing is symbolic, but it is like the clashing of symbols. It is the collision of real and these images and tropes and memes that we encounter. So the fact that we encounter tropes, memes, the fact that it goes through the lens of like fake alternative media and these fake influencers or controlled figures or these market-driven figures, whatever, clicks-driven, whatever, those manipulations point the same way anyway. At the fundament, the divisions are real, and there's a real fight going on. And that doesn't mean that every election is the most consequential in all of history. It doesn't mean that every political contest is, but there are going to be forces pushing for civil war in the United States. And those are the same forces that were already pushing for the separation of California and Cascadia back in 2020. You look right at who was behind that. And it wasn't just Tony Podesta. You had Nicholas Bergwijn of the World Economic Forum, #3 guy, multi-billionaire, was a teenage Marxist in France and had some kind of, market global domination. Well, he inherited, $1 billion. So that makes it helpful, very much like my own private Idaho, Keanu Reeves, it's like bumming around and he inherits money, straightens up. So, but these are interesting characters, but behind all this, you have what a danger that I perceive is, number one, in thinking that the political arena is merely a caricature instead of also a caricature. Right. And then number two.
No. You got to say that last bit real quick. So there's so many things you're saying. And I want to, number one, make sure people hear it. And number two, we got CJ who has to leave here pretty soon. I think you wanted to also weigh in on what Xoaquin is saying.
Bounce in a bit as well.
But say that last bit, Xoaquin, not merely.
Yeah. It is not merely a caricature. Right. It is also a caricature, but it is not merely a caricature. And the fight there is real. And if you can and I'm not saying it won't be a Republican or a Democrat, you have your neocons, you have to figure out what's going on with Vance or whatever. But, if Trump is out, right, if Trump is out in 2028, 2029, and whoever they get in on either side is on the agenda with the Europeans, with the City of London on re-kickstarting the conflict in Russia, I mean, they have a lot of boxes that they're going to tick with that. Not just that that they're going to keep evergreening this, this sunk cost shit that they've been doing in Ukraine this whole time. First of all, so they're going to they're never going to declare those losses lost. They can never agree to a ceasefire. They've got hundreds of billions of dollars already tied up in there and promises for future investment that they've already fucking financialized. And so the whole fucking thing comes down if they go for a peace that recognizes, the 70% valuable part of Ukraine, which happens to be 23% of its territory, but it's 73% of their physical economy, GDP. So Russia has that. If you were the United States, you would just make your deals with fucking Russia. Why are you, So the whole thing is just very clear. That's why I'm optimistic. It's not that I don't understand the class struggle in the United States, the declining wages, the crisis of middle class. I never fucking made it into the middle class. I fucking left the United States, because life was better elsewhere. So I fully understand the crisis that occurred and this obituary that we can read about the past of the assault on the middle class and how the middle class was destroyed, right? But it is in the interest of the elites to distribute socioeconomic power within the population with a degree of more evenness and more of a diamond-shaped society. It is more stable for them in their inter-elite conflict, because even for them as elites, they're individuals, they're egos. It's like fucking Highlander, there can be only one. So they actually need constitutional systems and to keep the people at least, thriving enough to get that political support, combining a simulation and simulacrum of success, or feelings, or abortion, or whatever issue. There's going to be a lot of things that are not directly socioeconomic issues that people believe in, that they vote for, right? So, but this all gets gamed, but without that, the whole thing comes down. So it's like, they don't want to be killing it. Think about how stupid the depopulation thing was. Okay, now we have 1 billion people left. Well, now you recreate the class system with 1 billion people left. Then you're just going to have the same story about, if we only had 100,000 people on the planet, that would be perfect, Then among the last 10,000, there was just fucking 1,000 people left, that would be perfect. In the end, there's only one person fucking pulling levers and pushing buttons, and robots and shit are jacking them off and getting whatever. Like it's loneliness, first of all. So you have this idea. What about this old idea that the elites, that in their magnanimity, that in their victory, that like a king used to count the subjects as they aggrandized him. If you just have a kingdom of fucking 5,000 people, fuck off. You have a kingdom of like 5 million people, like you could almost be considered an emperor. So the idea of population, and that the role of the elites is to reduce population, or that this increases, because they're in a post notional sphere, guys. Like, they don't need another fucking $1 billion. It's about the next experience. It's about the next achievement into their own image of themselves, you know. But we can control. See, the thing is that they're still human beings. They'll never totally break away from certain aspects of the culture. You know, we define. Think about. I mean, the things that they buy and they collect were sometimes created by craftsmen or artists that grew up penniless, right? So, you know, people, the populace, we drive the culture. We drive the ideas of like what greatness is. We can define the culture which the elites are, you know, in some type of rebellion against, but they're tethered to it in that sense, and they can at times live up to it. So I think these are the reasons.
The head's useless without the body, right? I mean,
yeah.
And this is why you have Jeff Bezos, you know, building a clock that'll last 10,000 years. And,
that's it.
Yeah,
it's king of the empire. The way I always describe it is they just want to be king of the empire. That's it. And they don't realize that at the end of the day, if there are fewer ants, there's a smaller ant pile, and they like that's great. You've won. What have you won? Nothing. Right. You know, you've won nothing. So.
No, that's beautiful. So CJ, I know you and Tom, I saw you kind of nodding and you know, some stuff that Xoaquin said you may want to comment on, but I want to give it to CJ for a minute because I know you've been waiting, and Gus, you've been pretty quiet for a while too. So I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance.
I've been trying to figure out how to say "take the fucking dog out" in Spanish to the housekeeper. So forgive me.
Saca el perro.
Por favor.
Yeah. I'm on a call. Can you take the fucking dog out? Sorry.
Tell the housekeeper take the dog out is chúpale la verga.
You always end it with rápido.
Well, don't say chúpale la verga though. That's I'm joking.
And she has her papers, so don't call fucking ICE either. So she's it's a clean transaction, I swear.
Hilarious. Great, obviously great comments by Xoaquin, and I think to me the challenge where it lies is that when you witness the past administration, you saw a little bit more speed in terms of the criminality utilizing the Department of Justice. You saw, for example, not only the J6ers, right, of which many of them were arrested, served time in prison. Owen Schroyer, from previously of InfoWars, spent time in prison because of his efforts to support Trump. You saw Roger Stone swatted and arrested. You also saw arrested Trump's previous lead. What's his name? He used to run Breitbart. Gosh darn, I forgot his name. Has a big platform right now, so he was arrested.
You mean Bannon?
Steve Bannon, yeah, Steve Bannon was arrested for his wall fundraising effort. So you saw those things with the previous administration and how they were able to do those arrests and do those rather quickly. And then when you benchmark that level of the DOJ under Biden and you benchmark that against where Trump is that where do we see the level of urgency in regards to, one, if there was election fraud? And I'm a two-time, by the way, I'm a two-time Trump voter, so I think I can speak to this with understanding that not left-wing or anything like that. I proudly did not vote in the last election, the federal election, and I probably won't vote in federal elections again. But what that amounts to is that Trump has had the DOJ, he's had the House, the Senate, and ultimately, if we live in a constitutional republic, we haven't really seen overall a legislative effort on this administration. It's been significantly a lot more through executive order that they've been able to accomplish and do the things that they're doing. So are we not a constitutional republic? The other thing that bothers me is a little bit more of the federal consolidation of power with really overstepping states' rights. And that to me is a big red flag. For example, you saw Biden do it with the 5G rollout with the cell towers where the federal government was given they give pretty much the tech giants the ability to decide where they want to put these 5G towers. And now we're saying the same thing with AI regulation. Perfect example where DeSantis in Florida wants to have some AI, and they all make common sense. They're very much common sense in terms of AI regulations. But you have the feds coming in saying, no, we're not going to allow the states to decide that. So to me, those are red flags. So when you think of states and you think of state sovereignty, you can't think of it just as the federal government side of the United States. And I've just come to the realization that we keep our friends close, but we keep our enemies closer. And I think one of the things that makes it hard for this administration is that I think too many times, and including his first run at presidency, is that I think that people that do support Trump openly, I think sometimes we excuse some of the things and we make excuses for his actions versus holding him accountable for those. I'm not comparing Hunter Biden to Trump's sons, but they're very much profiting off of this administration with the Trump coin and making billions of dollars off of his dad being in administration. Jared Kushner going around to Israel, brokering land deals, Ukraine. How can we excuse those actions? I mean, no one ever voted to put Kushner in as an ambassador or to do those things. So what's the justification of those things? And that's what makes it challenging for those people that continue to support this administration, that things are happening, is that how do you excuse those things? How to me, to a common person, do you say that if it was Biden doing these things, right? If this was another administration doing those things, that we would not be pissed off and be angry about those things?
Yeah, I think it's good not to be afraid to point out lack of integrity or what appears to be a lack of integrity, even though it's your side, right? You always have to be willing to do that. And anybody who isn't is running the risk of, being a Kool-Aid drinker. So I not sympathize, but I agree with you on that, CJ. And who was, I know, Tom, you were definitely, when Xoaquin was talking, I saw that there were some things he said. I didn't know if you wanted to comment on those.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go soon too, because I've got an article due for Newsmax to close the business today that if I don't get done, then I don't get paid a significant amount of money for. So I'm going to have to run it about 15 minutes or so. So
ditching us for a paycheck, Tom? Jesus Christ. Just kidding.
Well, at the end of the day, dudes, it's either that or the mortgage doesn't get paid, right? Now, that being said, there's a couple of things. Yes, everything that Xoaquin said earlier is absolutely correct. You've got, you're watching a shift, as the way I've been putting it recently. It's the high table. There's a shift as to who's going to be sitting at the high table, right? And in John Wick terms. And when you watch elites fight, sometimes you guys have to get out of the way. I used to describe this as, hey, you've got giants fighting and you're just ants and you're trying not to get stepped on. And at the end of the day, you watch to see who's, you got that giant versus that giant. You say to yourself, well, that guy's clearly better than that guy. It's not good or it's not great. It's not what I want, but it's better than what I have. And then we'll figure out, and then we can back the next giant to come in and knock that guy off the perch and keep moving. Now, that being said, to CJ's point about about are we a constitutional republic and the legislature and everything else? I'm sorry, but we don't have a legislature that works for the United States. You've got a fake majority in the House. You got a fake majority in the Senate. You've got a judiciary that's in complete and utter fucking oppositional mode. Trump is a guy by himself, and he has his cabinet. And what he has to do now is push events such that Congress can get out of oppositional mode and take all of his executive orders and codify them as law. They've passed 5 pieces of legislation in 2025. So anything anybody wants to complain about Trump not getting shit fucking done, that's on the legislature, because he couldn't get anything through, because at this point, you've got at least 80 members of the Senate and probably 3/4 of Congress that would vote to impeach him tomorrow for being Donald Trump, because they're either on the grift, they're scared to death, they like the gravy train, they're dyed-in-the-wool fucking Marxist or whatever, or globalist or whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they don't want that shit to change. So he has to play these games very, very carefully. And it's what you have. You use the power that you have available to you in the most expeditious way you can in order to get as much done as you can, while at the same time putting a strategy together that exposes all of this literally treasonous behavior. And then they kind of come a point where we hit the inflection point. This is why Trump is now taking to the bully pulpit. This is why he went out after Christmas to like, okay, fine, I'm going to do the fire breathing side chat, right? We're going to see more of that because the presidency is a particular type of bully pulpit, but you have to first get everybody to Ben's point earlier about, oh my God, if I don't see any fucking change, just burn it all down. Just burn it all down. Ben, you and I argued about it the last time we were on a podcast together. And I cautioned you then about that perspective. I'm not saying you're wrong to feel that way. That's not what I'm saying at all. I share every bit of frustration that everybody has. But at a certain point, you have to step back and think strategically, not tactically. And you have to say, how do I maneuver events such that I can move to that place where I can, as the president, walk right up to the line of legality and start getting shit done. And you can only do that if you have a populace behind you to the point where it's so overwhelming that we then have to actually say, for example, okay, let me stop for a second. Let's look at the recent Supreme Court loss that Trump took, which is you can't use ICE to do all this stuff. Just use the friggin' military if you want to do, you can't use the National Guards. If you want to do this shit, you got to use the military. The Supreme Court just told him where the limit on Article 2 power is. So, dude, it's time to use the military. So the Supreme Court just sanctioned that. Now the question is, are American people going to be okay with that? And at what point is when they're okay with Trump using the military in this way to do X, Y, and Z, that's the moment when all the obstruction in Congress starts to fade, because then they have to make a choice.
Well, see, now are you going
to go against the popular will of the people plus the president who has a defined Article 2 power to do this? Or are you going to continue to be an obstructionist bit of feckless jackwads? If you're going to do that, that's the key to the midterms. Because then Trump has the turn to say, I'm going to primary all you fuckers out. You're gone. And I think that this is why all the smurfing stuff is coming out. Look at who's literally being outed as stealing millions of dollars. Warnock, Stefanik, Lindsey Graham, right? Amy Klobuchar. All of these people, that's a big deal. Now all of these people John Thune, all of them at some point are going to look, you want to go to jail or do you want to vote for my agenda? And while that may not be enough for some people, that's all you're going to get at this point in the process, which is to Joaquin's point about how long this thing takes to actually start to unwind the level of treason that we're dealing with. We have to admit that we've been invaded from without and betrayed from within.
Right.
So stop thinking about the country as it's going to fall. We're going to lose the country if we lose the midterms too. No, we have we've already lost the fucking country. Can we get the country back at the midterms?
You see, I think a lot of what you're saying is going to lend itself towards accelerationism. And I'm finding myself going more and more in that direction. Like, and again, back to Ben and what we're talking about with the fix-it politics. And you said it, Tom, you just said it. You got to have the people behind you in order to take real action. Right. Well, the worse this gets, the more the people are going to start doing very bad things. And then you're going to see that accelerationism. And I think the only way out of this is handcuffs, heads on pikes. We're not seeing it, and the public doesn't have your understanding. By the way, I got to give Tom. I got to give Tom some props here, because your understanding of the financial plumbing is really unique. And I mean, I hate to glaze right now, but it's amazing what you understand about the financial plumbing. So it's a lot of people are going to have a hard time, and I see comments in there, Tom's smoking copium and everything like that. Well, you know what? If you're not listening to everything that people say when they talk, if you don't know the background of where they're coming from, it's really easy to take pot shots. But I like what you're doing, Tom. I want to have the same level of optimism, but I still can't get away from the fact that we see people doing terrible things and getting spirited off to their own country, whether that be Israel or anywhere else. And I don't think it's going to get fixed without, as you said, the population being behind them. And I don't think we have a lot of time for that to happen.
I agree. Now, I talked in theoretic terms here. Now let's start talking about brass tacks. He's got until I'll be honest with you, he's got less than 60 days. Okay. I'm not kidding. I feel all the same things you guys are feeling, but until you actually put all the bits and pieces on the table, that's why I think he's actually pushing the agenda. That's why I think Nick Shirley. Do you think Nick Shirley just came out of nowhere and showed up at the Quality Leering Center? Happy New Year, everybody! By the way,
Leering Center.
right? No. Tosh Patel went out the other day. Everybody missed it. Big long fucking tweet that the FBI has been in Minnesota since July doing all of this work, and then they took all that information and they handed it to Nick Shirley to then hand to him to then blow this thing up over Christmas. I can see the exact opposite. Like, you use the same tactics as your opponents. What I've been watching from Trump and company for a little while now is very interesting. For the first time, they're doing Alinsky. And they're not. Hey, I had Goober over here earlier. If you guys didn't see it, he was like asking for, and then a horseback rider came by and he fucked off. So, because that's what livestock guardians do.
Sretna Nova Godina.
Sretna Nova Godina.
Oh God, he's adorable. Oh my God,
I love it. Xoaquin's over in Serbia, and my wife, is also, her parents are from there. Well, really Yugoslavia, so we get to have some fun talks. Sorry to interrupt it. Xoaquin, your kid is so adorable. It just derailed the entire conversation.
Actually,
and he looks like a boy who's aware there's only two genders too.
Yeah.
And more importantly, this is who we're fighting about.
Right.
Oh yeah.
That's the important part. My dog, his kid, like my daughter who's off screen, all of it. That's what we're trying to do. And while we all have differences of opinion about this stuff, like, guys, if you're seeing shit that's not happening the way you want it to happen, at the rate you want it to happen, bitching about it on Twitter ain't going to get it done. It's time to, like I said at the beginning of this podcast when I was sparring with Gus a little bit. I said, hey, I live in rural North Florida. I also live in very rural Tennessee. And 2 years ago, I had guys coming up to me, every guy who had to come out and like look at my well or do some work on my house or whatever. And they sit and listen to me talk for like 5 minutes. They're like, okay, you know what you're talking about. I have one question and one question only. When do we get to start shooting them?
And in the spirit of
those guys know it. They're all ready for it. That's why you're not seeing this shit in Florida. Right? You're not seeing Quality Leering Center in Florida. You're not saying that's it because everybody would get fucking shot. That's why. So, at the end of the day, if the British get what they want and they break the friggin', the Northeast and the fucking cucks in the Northeast and the Great Lakes and the West Coast off over, I don't know, the healthcare standards or some other stupid bullshit. That's why you control the Gulf of America. That's why you break down Maduro in Venezuela. That's why you protect the middle of the country, because that's where your naval and your sea lane power comes from. These guys are seeing it from all these perspectives. When I watch this stuff in the order of operations, I'm like, I think it's pretty fucking obvious that they're trying. But can the average person perceive this? Of course not, folks. But so it's Trump's job now to go out and start selling how we're going to fix the housing market, how we're going to fix, the inflation, how we're going to fix the energy markets, how we're going to bring jobs back to you. It's 1981, and things didn't start turning around until 1983.
Okay, beautiful. I want to move on to closing comments. Show's almost over, and I know a lot of people have to go. Gus, I want to start with you, and because I know you might have also a little bit of recap on Tom's stuff, and then let's get some closing comments from everybody. Gus, please.
No, my position has always been that it's not my intent to be pessimistic or whatever some might call black pill or whatever. My position is being a realist, and my position is that empires rise and fall. This simply might be cyclical. That the peak empire is far behind us, and if so, my job is to protect my baby girl, my fucking 15-month-old daughter, and my nephews, and whatever. And if if that comes to the point of just me analyzing the chessboard and having assets offshore, having assets that are difficult for seizure, it doesn't matter if it's gold, silver, Bitcoin, foreign real estate, I'm in all of it. So, I don't just talk shit. I went and did the El Salvador thing. I went and did the Argentina thing. I'm going to Italy for fucking Easter. Like, I'll be in Rome at St. Pete's for fucking Easter this year. So, if the empire is, if the empire is indeed falling, so be it. My job is, I would prefer to save it. But if it's unsavable, then I'm prepared to protect my family. Right now in the U.S., our best form of protection is balkanization, which I think most of us have already done. I don't think anyone on this I don't think we're speaking to anyone in this group that's in, Chicago or whatever. But so we've all balkanized to some extent. But if we can't stop the arm of the federal government, and if it comes to the point where I have to jump ship, I'm ready to do that too. Again, I prefer to save it, but if it's unsavable, and this is just inevitable, cyclical, empires rise, empires fall, so be it. I prefer it didn't, but I have plans B and C in place already. I'll leave it with this. CJ, I don't mean to bet against your son, but Alabama +7 is a fucking lock. So I'm gonna take all the money I made in Melania coin, and I'm going to put it in Alabama today at +200 and +7. CJ, I know. It wasn't a dig. I'm just saying Bama doesn't get 7 points very often. So I don't usually engage in degeneracy, but I will on the holiday. So I'll leave it at that. And a great panel with all the guests. It's the first time I've spoken to many of you. I think we all ideological. I never understood people who are at each other's throats who agree on 75% of things or 80% of things. Maybe we disagree on where this thing is or the solutions or whatever. But if people agree on, if we agree there are two genders, printing money and credit out of thin air is bullshit, fraud is bullshit.
Heads on pikes.
Yeah,
heads on pikes. Yeah,
if we agree on a lot of shit, like, and we just disagree on where we go from here, like, that's cool. Like, it's again, we're not lunatic absolutists, so it's fine. And again, it's a pleasure speaking with many of you and getting to meet many of you for the first time as well.
Well, Gus, I can tell that the world is changing in a big way because you're on camera. That's like the first time I've ever seen it. Fucking awesome, dude.
Well, I was when CJ came on with that living room. I'm like, I gotta fucking go. I gotta go fuck CJ. CJ liquidated at the top.
There you go again. You're not showing your pool. Where's your pool behind you?
Well, we got in Florida. We got they call them Linnaeus, and I don't know what the fuck it was. It's for mosquito repellents. The bug shit. Yeah.
I thought you were in a giant greenhouse over there.
No,
Gus. So here's the deal. I have had 3 family members work with Gus over at perpetualassets.com. That's the website, right, Gus?
Yes, correct.
So understand, I have 3 very satisfied family members over there at perpetualassets.com. So if you want to actually control your own retirement, you got the gold, Bitcoin, is it IRAs? What's the exact product, Gus?
It's for retirement accounts, and yes, it's control for client take total control of the retirement account. We're biased towards metal and Bitcoin, obviously, but it could be used for almost anything. And the point is that you don't have to trust the boys at BlackRock and Vanguard to set up your IRA. You could set it up yourself and control it yourself.
Yeah, and again, I've got very happy family members with working with Gus. So please check his stuff out. And I know, Ben, you got to go soon. We're all leaving anyway, but Ben, I want to have you do your closing comments here, and of course, let us know where to find you. And I'll glaze before you do it. You've got Contrarian Corner, and it's an excellent blog, and you've had some of the best podcasts I've ever seen. So really, I want people to check Ben's stuff out. But Ben, please give us your closing comments. Let us know how to find you.
Yeah, I've had some good guests over the course of the year, but if you want to find my stuff, it's just the Substack at Contrarian Corner, also on the podcast apps. So I'm a little less serious on Twitter, but do rant there occasionally. But As far as closing comments, there was one of the things Tom was saying on like getting the support of the population, and you're kind of in a loop of, okay, you have to do something to get the support of the population, but to be able to do that, it's kind of the what comes first, right? So that was one of the things where I was thinking, like, you need to have some way to get that buy-in, right? But you're not going to get major buy-in unless you have make some like visual progress, right? So we'll kind of see where that goes. I'm sort of optimistic on some things for this year on that front, but as far as financial markets, this was kind of the one thing I wanted to wrap up with. You're kind of seeing the physical markets start to like the physical reality start to assert dominance over paper markets, right? And you're seeing it in, right, gold's been having it for longer. You're just starting to see it now in silver. And like, even if you look up the Shanghai price for stuff like platinum and palladium, like they're trading a significant premium, which is basically a clue for, like, silver's been getting a ton of attention, but platinum, I think, is going to be, I've kind of said this for a while, like a good place to hang out for a long time after we get through kind of whatever volatility is coming. But it kind of goes back to like the lines being drawn as far as US, Europe, China, like some of these different, like the geopolitical games, you're seeing it play out in financial markets. And I think to go back to something that Thomas said before, you're going to eventually see it with Brent crude and some of these other financialized contracts where, right, there's no reason that Bank of America should have a short position on silver that is 1 year's worth of mine supply, right? And there's no reason that Citi should have like 3 times that size as a short position, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? And so when you have some of these paper markets that are 10 times, 50 times, sometimes 100 times the size of what actually goes through the physical side of things, whether it's silver or oil, right? That's where I think you're going to see that reality the physical reality start to kind of assert dominance in 2020.
Oil's the last domino to drop, brother.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah,
agreed.
Oil's the big one. That's the that's the whole shebang. If oil goes, I mean, forget about it. Fuck.
Yeah, and Tom, you got to tell us a little bit about that in your closing comments, because I know you got some things on that, on Brent especially. Please, Ben, go ahead and.
No, that was all I had. So I think it's basically just going to be a story of physical markets that, right, you can only play the paper games and have the musical chairs going for so long, right? Eventually it breaks.
Yep.
Awesome, Ben. As always, thank you. And Ben is on with us. Gus, you're on Wednesdays, most Wednesdays when you're not conquering the world. And then Ben, you're on with us on Tuesdays. It's Kellerman's Corner. It's a newer show, and for us, and we absolutely love it. Let's go next to CJ. CJ, who has been sorely missed in the space, but I know, you've got a lot going on. We'd love to have you back as often as possible, though.
And great comments. Obviously, reflecting upon things. December 23rd, I turned 55. Okay, you don't have to agree whether I look good or not. That's fine, but I don't feel it. I feel like still 40, but 55 now. Quickly coming to the realization, I lost my dad in May. My dad was 93.
Shit, I'm sorry, man.
My dad came to the United States in 1969. He was born in Michigan, and he worked in the steel factories for 30 years, earned enough money to bring my family over, 5 sisters, 1 brother. And this past year is like, okay, well, you've reached age 55. You have a son that's 22. You have a son that's 19. And what you have to work towards is trying to understand and assess things where they are. And then when it's my time to go, to know that I can feel good that I made every effort to try to change or to help things. And to me, that perspective comes into place is that I don't think that there is a federal political solution to our country. I don't see it. And that's not being naive. I just, I don't think there's any type of thing that you can point to and say, hey, this is going in the right direction. These are things. So what I'm advocating for, and where I'm going to spend, the majority of my time is working to create and to assist in disruptive type of parallel systems away from the legacy systems. Everything from medicine, nutritional health, that's disruptive to the legacy systems. You see a lot of practitioners that are leaving those big hospitals and so forth because the reimbursements raised, because of all the paperwork that's involved. Same thing with food supply. I think food supply is going to be very important, and creating those items to find farmers, growers, farm to table type of environment. So that's where I'm going to spend my time and energy, is focusing on those, and then also been studying a lot, and I know it could take a wrong turn if it goes to the wrong place, but also learning more about Article 5 of the Constitution that does call for the states' governors to come together to dial back the powers of the federal government. There's a great site called Convention of States that you can read up on and learn about what that potentially could mean in terms of scaling back the power of the federal government. And I think that's going to be important for us. So that's where I've kind of arrived. Again, I'm being optimistic in terms of that more and more people are now really seeing through the things that have happened, whether, like I said, COVID, the election cycle, the things that have taken place, to have even more of an understanding. And I was having dinner with some friends, and they're very liberal, which we're fine. We still get along. We still argue about things. They always poke and things, and they have 2 young kids, and our kids were involved. And then his sister-in-law was in place, and they had a couple younger kids, and I was just listening to the conversation, and I didn't just jump in terms of my beliefs, but it was kind of refreshing to hear them talk, because they both, in the conversation, they kind of led to the fact that one of the reasons why they don't see things changing a whole lot here in our country is because overall they feel Americans are too lazy. And that kind of struck a nerve with me. I'm like, they're kind of right, because too many times we wait for things to directly impact us, to get involved, to get engaged. And so what level is that going to be, where you see more Americans waking up to the fact that we have been taken advantage of? We've seen everything from our tax rate, everything from the home prices, pricing out future generations. And we can only get creative in so many ways with 50-year mortgages and 10-year auto loans to solve these problems. But I do firmly believe that the educational the process is that the education from college universities, they need to have more accountability. If they're going to be backed by guaranteed student loans, that the education process, they have to have some accountability in terms of success rates with job placements. And we just have to turn the tables, but at the same time, we have to be optimistic about the future. But at the realization that, and I've been focused on this the last several years, it's just more on the local level of what I'm doing, and paying attention to everything from our mayor to our sheriff, and rolling that out at the state level. I'm in Indiana. I'm in Carmel, Indiana, and we're kind of the epicenter of these data centers. I'm not sure if you guys follow this, but we've had several municipalities that have been battling these tech companies coming in, and these massive. Amazon just built one in Northwest Indiana, and the amount of power that it's going to consume and water is just amazing. There's probably like 3 or 4 that have been they've been trying to advocate for land lease deals, and that have fought back, that they actually have won and stopped those. So I think that's the power of just and if you're in a state, kind of like what Gus alluded to, if you're in a state that is not following that process, now is the time. You have to really align yourself in the community that's going to be right for you in the long term. And I'll land it there.
Yeah, Siege, before I move it on, I'm going to go with Xoaquin next, then Tom, and then I'll have my few words. The thing, and Veles had to go. I'd love for him to be here, because these data centers with the water consumption, they can have this as a closed loop, where the water circulates through the station, and then it goes through radiators, and then the radiators take the heat out. Why they're having water being consumed rather than just rotated is something that we have yet to even understand, and the public is so uneducated they don't ask that question. But CJ, again, absolutely missed in this space. We'd love to have you back anytime.
Yep,
that you
absolutely,
have time
brother.
for us.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really good to see you, brother.
Thanks for hosting.
Oh, my pleasure. I want to go Xoaquin, closing comments. First of all, Xoaquin, Flores, we want to hear where we can find you. Secondly, you and I are from the same area. We're the same age. And there are a number of things you and I have talked about where our stories are kind of similar in many ways.
Yeah.
So I always really enjoy our kind of private conversations. And as you know, I'm on at least 50% of your shows too. So one of the hardest working guys in the space. Xoaquin, please give us your closing thoughts.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I'll keep them short.
And by the way, one of the most original thinkers in this space, let me add.
I do appreciate that. The things I'm looking at very closely these days, in this period of time, has been what is happening with Witkoff and his different diplomacy. What actually happened in Miami with the Russians? How does that relate to Venezuela? How do the interests of Exxon and Chevron in the Russian market to re-enter the Russian market? What are the trade-offs? How does you think about Venezuela as an OPEC country? You think about what the interest of the Saudis is. I was very curious to see the Saudis strike the southern government in Yemen, not the Houthis, but the Emirati.
Basically, the UAE forces.
Yeah. Who Israel prefers. So this was very, very interesting. So I'm tracking things.
I'm sorry, I just got to say this real quick.
Yeah.
That alludes to what you were talking about before. When the elites fight, you see new divisions that you didn't see before. So I'll leave it there.
That's right. And I think, when people, as an introductory to begin to understand the world, they think in kind of larger categories of this group, that group, this class, the ruling class, the middle class, the working class, this is what the Arabs want, or this is what the whoever. And it breaks down. It's there's more information, and it tells a different story. We're compelled to look at the information and make sense of it. So I'm all for Occam's razor. But one thing, I guess these are my exiting notes and kind of cautionary things in understanding the world and kind of how it is that we're able to put the world together. People make the mistake of treating human activity as if they are observing the inanimate objects, colliding, celestial objects or billiards on a table. They think that that these actors are behaving in straight lines, as if they're not strategic actors that are doing things to make things look like certain things, to build up certain investment, to build certain belief in a certain direction, and they're actually, on the hedge. They're actually doing something else completely, and it's part of the strategy. So you always think about, well, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Not if you are a conscious actor being observed, right? Not if there's someone trying to stop you. You're going to take an evasion course. You're going to zigzag. So you deconstruct, what is happening in the world. You deconstruct it. You don't just treat it like you're the only, the mind. You find this so much in liberal analysis, geopolitical liberal takes in geopolitics, so to speak, to the extent they exist, are very one-dimensional, and they just treat countries like they're people, like a single identity, there's not different interests within that country and different tensions. And then they also deprive that person of humanity, right? So they treat them like people, but then they also just treat them like inanimate objects. They refer to them as people. They treat them like they're inanimate objects that are not engaged in long game, that there's not a strategy there. And then it's oh, well, that sounds like a conspiracy, or that sounds like an inelegant proposition. No, sorry, motherfucker. Elegant propositions pertain to the description of non-sentient objects, right? Sentient beings act with intent, and the intent to not, if they're doing something, there's a conflict, there's contest. They're intentionally doing things to not be perceived, or that one thing that they're doing, that there are 2 or 3 very reasonable explanations for what they are doing, and they will feed those beliefs, right? So if you're doing one thing, if your opposition thinks that you are doing their thing, they're not going to oppose you. So the plan works through the plan. These are the kind of parting words for today. Plans always work through plans. So why would you deal with all this opposition? Make them think that you're doing their plan, right? So this is how we are seeing things line up in the world. It explains so much with Turkey. The other day, Erdogan went to Tehran. Who did he speak with? Well, back on November 30th, they agreed to a $1.9 billion massive scale train initiative. Like this is Belt and Road between Iran and Turkey. This takes me back to fucking the Persian pipeline that got nixed back in 06 or whatever. This was like before the Arab Spring. This was like before the so-called Green Revolution in Iran at this time. So what is this rapprochement between Iran and Turkey? So I'm looking at these things right now with a lot of interest. Venezuela, the Saudis, the Russians, the war in Ukraine. Find me on Telegram at New Resistance. This is what I'm talking about all the time. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's like whenever we have a panel like this, I wish we had like way more time. But we'll just have to have you back on so we can cover this, because the nuance with which you cover things is very often missed by anybody who doesn't want to spend, at least 6 hours a week listening to you on your channel.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah.
And that same goes for like anybody here. Tom, closing thoughts, please. Again, I like your work. And sure. By the way, I've been a subscriber for quite some time. I don't talk on there. I'm very quiet in the background. But closing thoughts, and please let us know how we can find you.
Sure. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to hear a word that Xoaquin just said because somehow StreamYard is incapable of actually routing audio properly to my iPad. So I'm going to have to review the tape so I can listen to what Xoaquin had to say just now, because everything he says is almost always worth not just the time taken, but the time to reflect on everything he says. So first off, as always, you can find me on Twitter at TFL1728. The Head Sneech. I'll be there pissing off about just about everything on a daily basis. goldgoatsandguns.com is the website, and the Patreon /goldgoatsandguns. And I do appreciate the fact that there are at least two patrons in the space, because I know that Ben started up. I remember when Ben got started, the first one he wanted to do as a subscriber is like, I want to do this. Would you be a guest? I'm like, absolutely. Let's get you off the ground. So I'm always fascinated to watch how, where you plant a seed and then it grows around you. And then what are we trying to do? We're trying to create a forest of new ideas and new people, because look, we are the new media. The people need to have these kinds of discussions, regardless of whether we all agree or disagree. And it's the dynamic of that is so very, very important. And so I have a rule: I'll do everybody's show once, and I'll go on the smallest podcast or the largest one, whenever it happens, simply because hopefully we might find the next great thing and next great person in this mix that will make the entire battle space that much more interesting for people to synthesize what they think is actually happening. So it's really, really important to me. And I think so when we go, it's been a while since Ben talked, and I know there's some things he covered. I unfortunately I can't even remember where I think we are. I think I've kind of laid it out as best I can. The old world is changing. The paper markets for physical commodities are ending. What I said earlier in the cast, I think, is the most important part of all of this, which is that there is a system that is in place that is old and older than the conflicts that we have in front of us and older than our lifespans. And understanding that we're still operating under 18th and 19th century rules, and those relationships and those old banking relationships and those old business relationships, and be it from an organized crime perspective or banking perspective or a political perspective, that still exists. That empire is the one that refuses to die. It is, at this point, I don't see the American empire in the same way that I did even 10 years ago when I first started doing this publicly. I see it very much as we're all the victims of the dead hand of the old system trying to continue to control it from behind the scenes. And they have that ability. They have those relationships. They have it all laying in wait, and their agents are everywhere. And America gets blamed for a lot of shit that it doesn't deserve. But at the same time, America has done a lot of things that it does deserve. There's a lot of opprobrium that the world throws our way that we absolutely deserve. But the question is, if we as a society, I'm speaking now as an American, if we as a society say, okay, we did all these terrible things and now we're going to fix it, you're going to have to, who else is going to help fix this? Who else really has the power to fix it? Russia can avoid it. China can play games with it. But at the end of the day, it's the old system doesn't continue through the 21st century without buy-in and control of the United States, or without the destruction of the United States, such that the capital base of the United States is transferred back to the old empire. That old empire exists it's the old Anglo-Dutch system of the British and the Dutch and the Dutch and the Portuguese and Venetian banks. And you call it Davos, you can call it the Rothschilds, you can call it the Jews. I don't give a shit. Call it whatever you want. That old system doesn't want to die. The United States is the thing at a fundamental level, at a philosophical level, which says we the people want this government. We are not the subjects of kings. We are not the subjects of oligarchs. We are not the subject of any of these people. And so that idea needs to survive. This is what we're fighting now, is literally that whole Alex Craner argument about two systems of governance, right? It's what the Promethean Action ladies call the American system versus the British system. That is the core argument of the day. They want to prove that humanity needs to be controlled by them like tax cows, because we're just ants and they know better. And they're the philosopher kings, and they're the great insouciant and wise ones. Fuck them. We're the Europeans who said, you know what? No, we, the people, are sovereign, not them. And that idea has to survive this attack. That's why the United States has to survive, at least in the short term, as the current 50-state compact, because it is the entire global financial system, which we're all a part of, whether we want to be a part of it or not, rests on the United States wresting control of it from the old Anglo-Dutch system and morphing it and changing it into something more equitable. If we do that, we can balkanize after we've killed them. Old Europe has to die. The City of London has to die. It has to be killed now. They cannot be allowed to leave and go to some other boat hole to then come back up 20, 30 years later. 300 years later, fine. They want to sit around and lick their wounds in their castles in Liechtenstein. I don't give a fuck. But kill them in their crib now. This is our opportunity to do it. And like it or not, Donald Trump is the guy who's decided, I'm going to take that system on. He's got his flaws. He's the general we've got, maybe not the general we want. And that's where we are. And I'm unlike Gus. I chose to stay. In 2017, when we started Gold, Ghosts, and Guns, I thought about fucking off to Mexico. Why? Because I was rapidly falling out of the middle class. I was between stints with Newsmax. I had no money. The only asset I had was the equity in my house, and I could convert that into a life at a much lower cash flow rate and live in Mexico. And I chose to stay. And I chose to stay and fight because this is my fucking home. And because America matters. In the grand history of humanity, America matters. Even if America is flawed, even if we've made mistakes, even if we've done terrible things, there's always a redemption at the end of the story if you say, yes, we want to change this. And for everybody and for what CJ said before he left about Americans being lazy, no, Americans are still happy. In order to get people to the point where they're willing to really fucking change things, you have to hit rock bottom. You have to reach that point where you're like, you know what? That's enough. Where Ben's frustration with the rate at which things are changing is real. And it's the catalyst for real change. It's the activation energy necessary to take us into the next thing, into the next phase of this. And if you want to win, fine. If you don't want to win and if you don't have the stomach for the fight, that's fine. Like what 2025 uncovered for me was that so many people don't actually want to win. They just want to sit on the sidelines and complain because they don't want to put any skin in the game. And this is no offense to anybody listening, and offense. Y'all make your calculus. Y'all make your decisions. I've decided to stay. I've decided to fight, and I will fight until my dying breath for that. because that is worth defending. That idea of we, the fucking people, say this, and we may fail, but nothing worth doing is not worth, putting everything on the table for. Or did we not remember the lessons of 1776 and 1781? Like, these people have been angry with us. They've been bitching at us. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Tom, for the record, too, I have over 100 guns and 60,000 rounds of ammunition. So I'd prefer to stay too.
I know. I didn't think you did, Gus. No, in no way, manner, shape, or form was that directed at you. Everybody has to make their decision, man.
Yeah.
Like, I've been buying guns again for the first time since COVID.
At these prices, you'd be crazy not to. And ammo, like now's we're back to 22 cents a round for 9mm instead of
exactly. I literally picked up 1,200 rounds and 4 ammo boxes about 20 minutes before I logged into the call. Best
prices in 7 years. Yes, 8 years, whatever.
Agreed with no argument, folks. You choose. Like, when I say I live in rural North Florida and I'm moving to more rural central Tennessee, there's a reason for that. These are my people. And these people get it and they understand. And, I've learned to go from being a suburban white kid with no skills from upstate New York to a reconstructed redneck in the South. And I've never been happier. At the same time, I also know how fucking hard it's going to be. So we've got a lot of work to do. This war is happening in every idiom and every theater. I haven't even touched on what I think is going on with Japan or any of these other things. And Nick, if you ever want to have that conversation, more than happy to do so, my friend. So thank you all very much for the invite today. It's been a blast. I've enjoyed every minute of it, other than missing Xoaquin's closing statement. So with that said, I'm out. Bonsai. Let's kill them all in 2026.
No, amen. And I'll give my last bit. First of all, it's an honor to have everybody on here, whether you've had to log off early or not. Mm-hmm. I've been in the background for many years, so to be on here with people who I consider friends, and it's just a blast, guys. And it's an honor to have you on. And I want to also shout out to the entire audience. We're honored to have you. Without you, this show does not exist. So, this is what it's about. It's about the audience. So you'll see me in there, with the comments. I've got so many great comments in here from the audience themselves. And I wish I could just post them all and have you all on the show. One thing we have to understand is that the world has gone to a place where there are so many echo chambers and people want to choose, this side, that side. But the reality is far more nuanced. And so even though we may have people on here who don't exactly agree on everybody agrees on something, and we fundamentally agree on almost everything, but a lot of the things we don't agree on, and that's okay. We need that. If we don't want to, like nothing new is created in monologue. You have to have a dialogue for something new to be created. You have to have people with different ideas, and you have to go outside of what you think is real in order to have something new. And this is why I lend ear to everybody here. And it's why I'm thankful to have everybody here. And you know what? Watch Rogue. We're going to do some new things this year. We got some new stuff coming up. So, definitely stay tuned to the show. And we'll be back. I don't know if we're doing a show tomorrow, but next week we'll be back full force. I just want to thank everybody. And by the way, before I go, last bit, we didn't get to where you can find Xoaquin Flores. I put it in the chat. Xoaquin, you're over on Telegram. I've got you at I never remember this.
Yeah, just Telegram. Also, you can find me Xoaquin Flores, spelled with an X on Instagram, a couple of accounts, and I have a very small account on X that I've started to play around with every couple of months, but nothing like I used to dick around with on Twitter. But Telegram is really the best way to interact with me and to catch up with what I'm talking about, those subjects that we got into. But yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. I was glad to be here. It's always good to see Tom, to meet Gus and Ben for the first time, and it was cool to see CJ. Of course, my buddy Matt. It's always a breath of fresh air. It's always great to hear from him. So anyway, guys, thanks for having me. Peace. I'm out.
Likewise, guys. Nick, Paisan, thank you for hosting.
Grazie, prego.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
care,
everybody.
guys.
We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.